rescue the country from the shambles into which we have absolutely descended. And we look forward to the day when, not too far off, I hope that you will become our Prime Minister. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you for putting on this extraordinary, great rally tonight. Great to see you all here. Great to stand in front of this great banner. Obviously not spelt by Gordon Brown, because it's actually spelt correct. Very good to... The first thing, I've been coming to these events for the last 4 years, and the first thing I want to say is a really big thank you to all the Conservative supporters in the City Circle who've helped our party, who've helped fund our party, who've supported our party right up to now. And obviously now, 4 years on, we are in the last 6 months before a general election. It's an incredibly exciting time for our party, it's an incredibly important time for our country. It's a time when we should be marshalling those final arguments we put before the British people. It should be a time when we are firing up the engine. We are making sure we've got all of the right candidates, all of the right team, all of the right policy, and I'm going to go on and talk about that, and I believe that we have. But first of all, I just wanted to say something else, which is this party values, understands, and will always make sure that it looks after the important financial services industry that so many of you work in. I know, the Conservative Party knows, that the financial services industry accounts for 10% of our GDP, that you provide 17% of the taxes paid in this country. That when it comes to business taxes, the city and financial services pays over 1/5 of the total tax burden. That is a point that we understand and we value. And we understand that the city is a world leader, and a world leader that we want to go on leading in our world. There are 250 foreign banks here in the city. 1/5 of the funds held by hedge funds are held here in London. You are responsible for 70% of the Eurobond turnover in the entire world here out of the City of London. We understand that, we value that, we will never do anything that puts that at risk. And let me say something else that is important when we think about financial services. When I think about financial services, I don't just think about people in city trading rooms and city dealing rooms or working in our great banks. I also think about the millions of people around our country working in call centres, selling insurance policies, giving people financial advice. Of course, there are over 100,000 people in financial services working in those great financial centres of Edinburgh and Glasgow. But there are also 100,000 people in financial services in Leeds, in Manchester, in Birmingham. So when people talk about the city and denigrate the city, I want to remind them that the financial services industry is one of the most important that we have. It's not just important for London, it's important for the whole country. It's important because of the taxes you pay, the jobs you provide, and the wealth that you're going to create for this country, and the Conservative Party will not forget that important point. It would of course be difficult for me to forget this, as my father was a stockbroker, my grandfather was a stockbroker, my great-grandfather was... Actually, when my father looks at my career choice, he is full of complete bafflement and disappointment that I didn't follow in his footsteps. But what I wanted to say to you all tonight, as we have just maybe 6 or 7 months before that election, is what I think is going to be absolutely vital at that election. Because of course when you go into an election, you've got to have the right slogans, you've got to have the right policies, you've got to have the right team, you've got to have the right candidates, and I believe we have got all of those things. When I think of slogans, there's not much more powerful than, do you really want another 5 years of Gordon Brown? When I think of the team, I just think I've got people like George Osborne, like William Hague, like Ken Clarke, who would really make a difference to the government of this country. When I think of policies, I think of all the areas in which we have led and Labour have followed. But you know what? I think much more important than those things, when it comes to an election, is to have a big argument that you are putting forward about the future of your country. And I think the big argument we have is this, that over these last 12 years, there has been complete irresponsibility irresponsibility from government, irresponsibility in terms of government spending, and irresponsibility in terms of what we've encouraged both in our public services and in our society. And I think the problem of the government and government spending is the most important of all. I'm told nowadays, if you go and see Gordon Brown, you have to give him what is called a news sandwich. You have to give him some good news on the top, and you give him some good news on the bottom, and you give him the real news in the middle, which is the bad news. If you don't, apparently the Nokia phones, the printers, everything else that isn't nailed down flies around the room. But I thought, what news sandwich can I give you all tonight? And I suppose the good news is this, that this year the Conservative Party's had a great year. We topped the poll in the European elections, we won right across the country in the local elections, the party is in good heart, the party is in good spirit. That's the top piece of good news. The bottom piece of good news is I think this Prime Minister has lost all touch with reality and all ability to deal with the big problems our country has. But the bad news in the middle, I'm afraid, is that if we win that election, we are going to have the most difficult inheritance of any government in 40 or 50 years. If you just take what I think has been the height of irresponsibility, which is our budget deficit, just think about it like this. Next year, we are forecast to borrow 14% of our gross domestic product. That is twice as much as Dennis Healey was borrowing in 1976 when we nearly went bust. So when the government tells you they have a plan to cut the deficit in half over the next 5 years, what they mean is they can almost get it back to how bad it was when Dennis Healey nearly went bust in 1976. That is the height of irresponsibility. So whereas they have shown us irresponsibility, we must show responsibility. And I think you saw that at our party conference, where we didn't just say, well, let's blame Labour for everything, let's not set out an alternative. We set out patiently and clearly what we would do to freeze public sector pay, to make changes in our pension system, to take away benefits from those on higher earnings, doing the responsible thing in contrast to Labour's irresponsibility. And that